Iran says it hit America's aircraft carrier. The United States says that's a lie. Both sides are pointing at each other and calling the other a liar on live television. And somewhere in the Gulf of Oman, a $13 billion nuclear-powered warship with over 5,000 crew members is at the center of the most contested military claim of this entire war. Iran's army spokesperson claims the attack put the USS Abraham Lincoln, quote, out of operational service and forced it to pull back from its position. The IRGC says it conducted a successful missile and drone attack on the carrier. Iran's Navy claims it fired a coast-to-sea missile at it, and U.S. Central Command responded by posting on X, quote, to be clear, the Abraham Carrier Strike Group continues to dominate Iranian airspace from the sea. But here's what nobody is telling you. Something did happen near the Lincoln. U.S. news media confirmed that an Iranian vessel approached the carrier and the strike group opened fire. A helicopter launched 2 Hellfire missiles at the boat. 2 U.S. officials confirmed the engagement to CBS News. The status of the Iranian vessel and its crew was not disclosed. So what actually happened? Was the Lincoln hit? Was it damaged? Was it forced to retreat? Or is Iran fabricating the entire story? Tonight on War Clock, I'm going to lay out every claim, every denial, every piece of evidence from both sides, and let you decide what the truth is. Because in this war, the truth might be the most important weapon of all. Let's go. Let me start with Iran's claims, because they've made not one, not two, but multiple separate claims about attacking the Lincoln over multiple days. And the escalation of those claims tells a story in itself. March 5th. Iran claimed that drones had struck the USS Abraham Lincoln. This was the first assertion. Iranian state media reported that unmanned aerial vehicles had successfully engaged the carrier. No video evidence was provided. No specifics about damage were offered. The claim was broad. We hit the carrier with drones. March 6th, Iran's Navy escalated. They claimed to have fired a coast-to-sea missile at the carrier. A coast-to-sea missile is a different category of weapon entirely. An anti-ship ballistic or cruise missile launched from a fixed coastal position. This would represent a much more significant engagement than a drone attack. Again, no conclusive evidence was published. Then came the most dramatic claim. Iranian army spokesperson Abul Fazl Shekarchi declared that the combined attacks had put the nuclear-powered vessel, quote, out of operational service, and that the Lincoln had been forced to pull back from its position in the Sea of Oman. This is an extraordinary claim. Taking a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier out of operational service would be one of the most significant military events since World War II. No aircraft carrier has been put out of action by enemy fire since the Japanese sank carriers in the Pacific in the 1940s. If Iran genuinely disabled the Lincoln, it would be the single most important naval engagement in 80 years. The IRGC separately confirmed, through their channels, that they conducted a successful missile and drone attack against the Abraham Lincoln. Iranian state television ran the story extensively. Social media accounts affiliated with Iran's military published graphics and animations depicting the carrier being struck. The narrative was clear. Iran had achieved what no military force has accomplished since World War II. They had taken out an American aircraft carrier. Now, the U.S. military's response. CENTCOM denied every single claim categorically. They accused Iran of, quote, peddling recycled lies. On March 14th, CENTCOM posted on X, quote, to be clear, the Abraham Carrier Strike Group continues to dominate Iranian airspace from the sea. U.S. officials separately told media there was, quote, no evidence the vessel was hit. The language from CENTCOM is important. They didn't say, we're investigating the claims. They didn't say, we're assessing damage. They said the carrier continues to dominate. Present tense, active operations, dominating. That's a flat denial dressed in military confidence. But here's where this story gets complicated, because something did happen. And both sides are telling partial truths while hiding the full picture. U.S. news media reported, and this was confirmed by 2 U.S. officials to CBS News, that an Iranian vessel approached the aircraft carrier earlier in the week. The Lincoln Strike Group identified the approaching vessel as a threat. A helicopter from the carrier group engaged the Iranian vessel with two AGM-114 Hellfire missiles. The Iranian vessel was struck. The status of the vessel and its crew was not disclosed, which is Pentagon language for, "We destroyed it, and we're not going to talk about what happened to the people on board." The carrier was several hundred kilometers from Iran's maritime border in the Gulf of Oman at the time. That's important context. Several hundred kilometers means the Lincoln was operating well outside Iran's immediate coastal waters, in international waters of the Gulf of Oman, between the Strait of Hormuz and the open Arabian Sea. An Iranian vessel approaching a carrier strike group at that distance would have had to travel a considerable way, and would have been tracked by the Lincoln's radar, satellite surveillance, and patrol aircraft long before it got close. So what was this Iranian vessel? And what was it trying to do? The Pentagon hasn't said. But given what we know about Iran's naval tactics in this war, the most likely answer is one of two things. Possibility 1. It was an IRGC fast attack craft, one of the small high-speed boats armed with machine guns and rocket launchers that Iran uses in swarm tactics throughout the Gulf. These boats have been attacking commercial shipping, approaching military vessels, and conducting harassment operations since the war began. If an IRGC speedboat approached the Lincoln's defensive perimeter, the carrier group would have engaged it as a threat, exactly as they did with the Hellfire missiles. Possibility 2. It was an explosive-laden drone boat, similar to the naval drone that struck the Safe Sea Vishnu tanker off Qasr, an unmanned vessel packed with explosives, guided toward the carrier by remote control. If the Lincoln's defenses detected an approaching unmanned vessel on a collision course, they would have destroyed it at maximum range, which is exactly what a Hellfire engagement from a helicopter suggests. Either way, an Iranian vessel approached the most expensive warship in the U.S. Navy's fleet, and the Navy destroyed it before it could complete its mission. That's a confirmed engagement. That's not propaganda. 2 U.S. officials confirmed it to CBS News. But, and this is the critical distinction, an Iranian vessel approaching and being destroyed is very different from an Iranian vessel successfully hitting the carrier. The first is a failed attack. The second would be a historic military achievement. Iran claims the second happened. The U.S. insists only the first occurred. Now let me explain why this matters beyond the he said, she said of wartime propaganda. The USS Abraham Lincoln is a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. It is one of the most powerful weapons platforms ever built by any nation in human history. 333 meters long, over 100,000 tons displacement, powered by 2 nuclear reactors that give it essentially unlimited range, carries approximately 75 aircraft, FA-18 Super Hornets, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare planes, E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft, and helicopters. Protected by a carrier strike group that includes Aegis-equipped destroyers and cruisers, submarines, and supply vessels. The entire strike group represents roughly $40 billion in combined military hardware and over 6,000 personnel. The Lincoln is one of 2 carrier strike groups currently deployed to the Middle East, alongside the USS Gerald Ford. Together, they represent approximately 40% of the U.S. Navy's operational carrier force. President Trump described their deployment as an armada, and the word is appropriate. This is the largest American naval concentration in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. If Iran genuinely damaged or disabled the Lincoln, even temporarily, the strategic implications would be enormous. First, it would prove that American aircraft carriers are vulnerable to Iranian weapons. That vulnerability assessment would echo around the world, in Beijing, in Moscow, in Pyongyang. Every adversary that has ever contemplated how to counter American naval power would study the engagement and adapt their own strategies accordingly. Second, it would undermine the entire premise of America's military posture in the Gulf. The carriers are there to project power, deter aggression, and reassure allies. If a carrier can be damaged by Iranian attacks, the deterrence value collapses. Gulf states that are counting on American naval protection would lose confidence. Commercial shipping companies that assume the Navy can protect them would reevaluate. Third, it would validate Iran's asymmetric strategy. If a combination of drones, speedboats, and missiles can threaten a $13 billion carrier, then the entire cost calculus of naval warfare shifts. Why build aircraft carriers that cost $13 billion if they can be threatened by weapons costing a fraction of that amount? This is why both sides are fighting so hard over this narrative. For Iran, claiming to have hit the Lincoln is a propaganda victory of incalculable value. It tells the Iranian people their military is winning. It tells the region that American power is not invincible. It tells the IRGC's ranks that their sacrifices are producing results. It tells the world that Iran can stand against the most powerful navy in history and draw blood. For the United States, denying the claim is equally critical. Admitting any damage to a carrier would be psychologically devastating for American public support for the war, for Allied confidence in American military capabilities, and for the credibility of the Navy's ability to operate freely in contested waters. Even a minor hit, a small fire, superficial damage, a temporary operational disruption would be magnified by global media into a narrative of American vulnerability. And this is where the fog of war makes truth nearly impossible to determine. Iran has every incentive to exaggerate or fabricate. They've been doing it throughout the conflict, claiming inflated kill counts, exaggerating damage assessments, and publishing propaganda videos. Their track record of truthfulness during this war is poor. But the United States also has every incentive to minimize or conceal. The Pentagon has a long history of controlling information about damage to high-value assets during wartime. During the 1991 Gulf War, the military tightly controlled images and information about American casualties and equipment losses. During Afghanistan and Iraq, damage to bases and equipment was often classified or downplayed. The reflexive response of any military bureaucracy to embarrassing information is to deny, minimize, and classify. CENTCOM says the Lincoln continues to dominate. But CENTCOM also said the KC-135 tanker crash in Iraq was not caused by hostile fire, a claim that still hasn't been independently verified. CENTCOM's credibility is strong but not absolute. Military spokespeople are not neutral observers. They're participants in an information war as intense as the physical one. The satellite imagery that could settle this debate definitively, commercial satellite photos of the Lincoln showing its current condition, hasn't been publicly released or analyzed by independent observers. If the carrier is undamaged and operating normally, satellite imagery would show aircraft on deck, normal operations, and no visible damage. If there was a fire or structural damage, it would likely be visible from orbit. The absence of publicly available satellite analysis is itself notable, though it could simply reflect the lag time between events and commercial satellite passes. What we know for certain is this: the USS Abraham Lincoln is deployed in the Gulf of Oman. An Iranian vessel approached it and was destroyed by Hellfire missiles from a Navy helicopter. Iran has made multiple claims about striking the carrier with drones, missiles, and combined attacks. The U.S. categorically denies any successful hit. The carrier strike group remains operational according to CENTCOM. Iran has launched approximately 700 missiles and 3,600 drones since the war began. CENTCOM has destroyed over 2,000 targets in Iran and sunk 60 Iranian frigates. And the information war between both sides is as fierce as the physical combat. The truth is probably somewhere between Iran's claims and America's denials. Iran almost certainly did not disable or put the Lincoln out of operational service. A carrier that size doesn't go dark without the entire intelligence community of every nation on Earth noticing, but whether a drone or missile fragment struck the hull, whether a fire started and was quickly contained, whether there was any damage that was repaired without public disclosure, those questions remain unanswered. And in a war where both sides are willing to lie to protect their narrative, they may remain unanswered for a very long time. What is not in dispute is the strategic reality. Iran is throwing everything it has at the most expensive warship on Earth: drones, missiles, speedboats, drone boats, coast-to-sea missiles, wave after wave, day after day. The Lincoln's defenses are holding. But the threat is real, the attacks are continuous, and the cost of stopping a $500 drone boat with a $4 million interceptor is a math problem that eventually breaks in Iran's favor. The Lincoln is still operating. The Navy is still fighting. But somewhere in the dark waters of the Gulf of Oman, the wreckage of an Iranian vessel sits on the seafloor, destroyed by Hellfire missiles because it got too close to a carrier that Iran says it already hit. The Pentagon says nothing happened. Iran says everything happened. And the truth, like so much in this war, is somewhere in the fog between the explosions. This is War Clock. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Share this video. Because the fight over what really happened to the Lincoln is the fight over who controls the narrative of this war. And narratives win wars just as surely as missiles do. I'll see you in the next one.